lot of business to get to, especially with all this recent news. So.
Yes, all of a sudden the phone started blowing up.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. We appreciate you taking a little time out to chat with us. So let me, once we get our push notification out, we'll just go ahead and get started. Okay, we are live now. So, hey folks, welcome in here to the News 12 Now desk. Appreciate you joining us just after 11:15, 11:20 now on our Tuesday, and it was a pretty quiet Tuesday, and then all of a sudden things kind of blew up. So I'm joined by John Patrick with WGAC. John, we're talking golf right now, and a huge day in the golf world. The LIV Tour and the PGA Tour, who have been rivals for the better part of a year now in this great soap opera of golf, are now joining forces. So can you kind of break down for us what's happening between these two right now?
Well, details are very vague at the moment. Not a lot of details have come out. But yes, you pretty much summed it up. Apparently the PGA Tour, LIV, and the DP World Tour are going to merge. How that's going to end up being reflected still needs to be worked out. Two of the principals, the commissioner of the PGA Tour, Jay Monahan, and a Saudi principal from the investment fund have spoken, and they've as much as admitted that this is fresh, brand new news. As a matter of fact, Greg Norman was only informed of it about 10 minutes before the announcement. So they have not created a structure yet. They have not created an infrastructure. I think we live in a world where, possibly the talks were getting to a point to where they may have been leaked and they wanted to go ahead and get the information out there, but we know no details.
Yeah, I mean, there was about 1,000-page press release that just came out, and that's all we got. Although in the last, 10 minutes or so, I just got the letter from Jay Monahan to the PGA Tour players. So it looks like the PGA Tour guys didn't even know, because you saw, I don't know if you saw Colin Morikawa tweeted out, something like, "I love finding news on Twitter," and Joel Damon tweeted something in a very Joel Damon fashion. But John, this seemed like something that was impossible as recently as 2 months ago at the Masters. So what are you thinking right now when you hear that these two entities are joining forces, three entities are joining forces?
Well, the question that I kept asking on the golf show was, how does this end? Because I didn't see how this ended. I couldn't come up with a way that this would come to a conclusion. They apparently did. We have no idea how long they've been talking. We have no idea how long this has been germinating. I get a sense by their lack of detail that it hasn't been long, that they, this may be a byproduct of the lawsuit. It may be a situation to where these entities had to sit together and discuss the lawsuit and discuss where they were going from here. Maybe the judge ordered it. I'm purely speculating. But somehow they got in a room and got at least this much of it figured out. And I think they all came to the conclusion that in the world of commerce and sport, size matters. And they needed, and not only does size matter, but, fragmenting portions of your sport probably won't bode well in the future. That there's a LIV Tour, that there's a PGA Tour, that there's a DP World Tour. No other sports do that sort of thing. So I think they just came to the conclusion, from a monetary point of view, from a point of view of going forward, that we needed the economy of scale to do this.
Mm-hmm. And I think back to less than a year ago now, Jay Monahan was on national television and told Jim Nantz in an interview at the desk that he had a meeting with his players, or sent a letter out to his players, basically asking them, have you ever had to apologize for being on the PGA Tour? Essentially drawing a line in the sand with LIV in that regard. What do you make of his comments then, and Rory's comments, and JT's comments, and Tiger's comments throughout the past year and a half, to all of a sudden they're all working on the same team now?
I think that's going to be a challenge, unless there have been some backroom talks. Rory McIlroy has famously, it's been discussed in golf circles that some of his career suffered last year for the amount of time he was putting in defending the PGA Tour, and now they're all as one. I do think, there's going to be some disagreement, some unhappiness amongst the players. Maybe we still have to see the infrastructure. We still have to see what's going to come out of this. But I can't imagine this going over well with 100% of the players.
Yeah, and I imagine everybody knew that going into this. So when we look at this deal, again, we don't know a lot of details about it, but just the fact that these three groups are now merging, who are the winners in your mind in this whole thing, and who are the losers in this whole thing?
I don't know that there are any losers. I think they'll work very hard to make sure nobody loses. But you can't deny that the players who left for LIV won. I mean, they were already winning by getting to play in all of the majors. They took their money, they got to play in their golf tournaments, and they got to participate in the majors. They were already winning. I think to come back to the PGA Tour or to come back to whatever the World Tour will be, they have to be looked at as the winners. I don't know that anybody's going to lose. As I said, I think they will do all that they can to make sure there are no losers in this.
Yeah, and I think if I had to pick one right now, it would be the guys that we named earlier, the Rorys of the world, who stood so firmly by the PGA Tour. Just to now have all those guys that they kind of outcasted come back into the same circle that they're now in. But I think another thing to note is a winner here really is the fans, because like you said, fragmenting the game is never good, to have one tour here, one tour there, one tour over here. And I think back to Sunday at Augusta, and I see John Rahm and I see Brooks Koepka playing in the final round together, a LIV guy and a PGA guy. And that was just so fun to watch those two absolute titans of the sport battle it out. And so I think as fans, we kind of win because we're going to be able to see more of that on a more regular basis. What do you think?
I do think that. I think the biggest question in my mind early in this process, and the facts may bore out differently, but if I had to guess as to how they're going to go about this, could we envision 40 to 50 tournaments a year? Not a PGA Tour, not a LIV Tour, not a DP World Tour, but 40 or 50 tournaments a year. That's it. And X amount of players will get to play in those from those three tours, and that's a lot of players. So will players be left out? Will tournaments be left out? What happens to Hilton Head? What happens to the John Deere? What happens to a tournament in Belgium? If that's the way they go, I only think it makes sense if they create a massive one tour that plays every week for 40 or 50 weeks with some sort of, culmination somewhere to crown some sort of champion. I can't see them continuing to split and play a variety of tournaments each week, 2 or 3 tournaments going up against each other. Again, pure speculation. They've got to work all that out. I do think the PGA Tour was beginning to get some pushback from sponsors who, were putting up $15 million, and next year your tournament's going to be a designated event. We're going to need $5 million more from you. I do think that was becoming a bit of an issue. So if they can consolidate and turn it into 40 or 50 tournaments a year, that would be interesting. But that will come at a cost to some communities and to the charitable well-being of some of those communities.
Yeah, and I just have one more for you. I know you obviously got a lot to do today. One more question for you. Is there anything that you can liken this to in the world of sport or in the world of entertainment that, for the non-golf viewer, what exactly is happening here? I'm an old school WWE guy. I think about when Vince McMahon bought WCW. I don't know if that, hits home with you, but what can this be compared to? We haven't seen anything like this before.
Well, 2 things. 1, it doesn't hit home with me. I apologize. 2, if you're old enough, and you're not, to remember when the AFL merged with the NFL, and it became the NFL. And now teams like Denver and Oakland and and the Jets and the teams that merged with the NFL, it became the NFL. If you're old enough to remember that, then this will be very similar. I would think that the principals in this agreement hope and pray that it works out as well as it did for the NFL and the AFL.
Yeah, and again, I think that's what everybody's hoping for in the end of this, because we just want to see, as fans, the best players in the world play some really good golf. So, John, appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll be talking again as this continues on, as we start to get more details and really see how this thing's going to shape out. So, again, thanks for joining us.
Nick, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good one. So there you go, folks. John Patrick, WGAC, joining the desk this morning. Just a really interesting perspective there. Do appreciate the time from him. Yeah, it's going to be one of those things that we get new details, and I apologize, I'm checking the phone here, but we did just get recently the letter that Jay Monahans sent out to his players. It's like 2 pages long. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but in just looking through all this, just looking through all this, we'll have to just see how this all plays out. So we'll continue on with that. We'll have more on this on the TV side of things at midday. Thanks for tuning in.